we're going to have Meagan Musick with Virginia Department of Agriculture talk to us about hemp and CBD products that are sold at the farmers markets and what you need to do. And then we'll have Erin Williams, who is the legislative, will talk to us about the legislative and policy side, Delta 8, Delta 9, et cetera. So I'm going to turn it over to Meagan and let her get started.
All righty. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So y'all have heard from me a little bit kind of here and there today as I guess a disembodied voice kind of chiming in. So my name is Meagan Musick. I'm a food technical specialist with the Virginia Department of Agriculture's Food Safety Program. I work in the southwest part of the state, and I've been with the program for about 13 years. And I did want to just echo the sentiments from the other presenters today and just say thank you guys for putting this together. I think there's been a lot of great information today, and hopefully we're setting everybody up for success with the upcoming farmers market season. So let me go ahead and get my presentation up here. Today I'm going to be talking about hemp in food. So we're just going to be talking about hemp extracts, how the manufacture and sale of these products is regulated in Virginia. And during this presentation, I'm just going to touch on what hemp is, the regulatory background for how we got to where we are right now, the applicability of the food and drink law, and the specific regulatory requirements for extracts and labeling of hemp products that are being offered for sale in the state of Virginia. So industrial hemp and marijuana are the same species of plant, which is Cannabis sativa. Legally, industrial hemp, or simply hemp, is a cannabis plant that has no more than 0.3% total delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC. Anything above that limit is marijuana. So hemp is grown primarily for its stalk or seed for use in textiles, foods, and papers, and the flowers are grown for cannabinoids for use in nutraceuticals and supplements. And basically, the total percent of delta-9 THC is what determines whether a plant is industrial hemp or marijuana. And this threshold is derived from the 2018 Farm Bill, which I will touch on in a couple of slides. So the FDA has oversight for food, dietary supplements, cosmetics, and medicine in the US. And any substance that is added to food is a food additive that is subject to pre-market review and approval by FDA, unless the substance is generally recognized as safe, or what we commonly call GRAS. Substances are determined to be GRAS by qualified experts through the use of scientific data and information about use of the substance. So the FDA currently has 3 GRAS notices for hemp seed-derived food ingredients, and that's whole hemp seed protein, and hemp seed oil. So these 3 ingredients are federally legal in food and beverage products intended for human consumption. However, there is currently no federal law which approves the use of hemp extracts or CBD oil in any food, beverage, or dietary supplement. CBD is not generally recognized as safe and is considered an adulterant by the FDA. Now, at the state level, states are independently enacting legislation to recognize consumable products containing hemp extracts as food. In these states, hemp extracts as an ingredient in food are not an adulterant, and many states are allowing hemp extracts in food products. Just to name a few, Colorado, Connecticut, Florida, Tennessee, Oregon, Kentucky, and Virginia, just a couple examples. And so these states are adopting laws and regulations for the licensing, processing, inspection, labeling, testing, et cetera, to provide regulatory oversight for the manufacture and sale of foods that contain hemp extracts. And I will specifically talk about this process in Virginia on the next slide. So despite what's going on at the state level, it is still a prohibited act under Section 301 of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act to introduce into interstate commerce a food to which CBD or THC has been added. FDA has issued warning letters to companies who violate the FD&C Act for selling CBD products in interstate commerce, specifically for companies who make marketing claims to prevent, diagnose, mitigate, treat, or cure diseases in human and animal foods. And this slide just kind of provides some background on how we got to where we are today in Virginia with hemp in food. So in 2018, the federal Farm Bill was signed into law. It established a new definition of hemp, and the new definition of hemp included no more than 0.3% THC on a dry weight basis, and removed this level from the definition of marijuana in the Controlled Substances Act. It established a regulatory framework for the commercial production of hemp. In Virginia, in July of 2019, the Northam administration directed VDACS to treat hemp-derived extracts intended for human consumption as approved food ingredients. The VDACS food safety program was directed to place registered industrial hemp processors under food safety inspection, so that inspected and approved processors could manufacture a hemp-derived extract intended for human consumption and offer it for sale. And as of March 14th of this year, we have 26 extract manufacturers under inspection in the state. Next, in April of 2020, the General Assembly enacted House Bill 1430 and Senate Bill 918 relating to industrial hemp standards for extracts, and regulations through the addition of Article 5 to the Virginia Food and Drink Law. So under Article 5, an industrial hemp extract that is intended for human consumption is a food that is subject to the Food and Drink Law. And the last section of Article 5 authorized the Board of Agriculture to adopt regulations for the enforcement of Article 5. So finally, on August 15th of 2022, these regulations went into effect, which is Chapter 595, regulations governing the manufacturing and sale of products that contain industrial hemp extracts intended for human consumption, or what we just commonly call the hemp regulation. This regulation established tolerance levels on contaminants, labeling requirements, and batch testing requirements. And the regulation is applicable to manufacturers of a hemp extract. It also applies to manufacturers of a food, beverage, or dietary supplement that contains a hemp extract, and it applies to anybody that is offering consumable hemp extracts and hemp products for retail sale. So now we'll look at the hemp regulation a little bit closer, and I'll just highlight a few definitions and some other requirements from it. First is the definition of approved source. So a manufacturer of an extract or food containing an extract is an approved source if they operate under inspection by the responsible food regulatory agency and in compliance with law that pertains to industrial hemp extracts in the location in which such products are manufactured. So basically what that's saying is whatever state that they are operating in, they need to be under inspection with that state's regulatory authority for hemp in food, and they need to be in compliance with the applicable laws and regulations in that area that they operate. If they meet both of those, then they are an approved source in Virginia. So if you are purchasing an industrial hemp extract from an out-of-state manufacturer, they should be able to show you a license, permit, inspection report, or other documentation to show that they are under inspection with their regulatory authority. This type of documentation will show that they are an approved source. And as I said, it needs to be from a regulatory authority. So documentation from a third-party auditing company is not acceptable for verifying approved source. Within the regulation, sections 30 and 40 require that a person who manufactures an industrial hemp extract and introduces it into commerce obtain an inspection from the VDACS food safety program. The regulation further states that the manufacture or sale of food that contains an industrial hemp extract is not eligible for exemption from inspection that's provided in the Virginia Food and Drink Law. So this means that any consumable hemp product, such as tinctures, gummies, etc., being offered for sale at a farmer's market must come from an inspected source. Processors are not able to operate under the home kitchen exemption when making consumable hemp products. And I did also want to mention that we are specifically talking about products that are consumable by mouth and intended for human consumption. The food safety program does not regulate or have oversight of topical products or inhaled products. And we also do not have oversight over products intended for animal consumption, such as pet treats or other types of animal feed. So a few more definitions here. An industrial hemp extract is the extract of a cannabis sativa plant that has a concentration of tetrahydrocannabinol that is no greater than that allowed by federal law, and that is intended for human consumption. So by law, they cannot have more than 0.3% total delta-9 THC, which is based on the 2018 Farm Bill. An extract is a naturally occurring phytochemical produced by the industrial hemp plant that has been removed from the inert structural material of the plant. So synthetic products such as Delta-8 and Delta-10 are not recognized as an approved source in Virginia because they do not meet the definition of an extract under the regulation. Delta-8 and Delta-10 are isomers of Delta-9 THC, and they have an intoxicating effect similar to that of Delta-9. They are both naturally produced in the cannabis plant through degradation of Delta-9 THC, but the plant itself doesn't have a biosynthetic pathway for production of these cannabinoids. So through that degradation, the amounts of Delta-8 and Delta-10 that are naturally found in the plant when they are detected by testing are very small. And it's not economically feasible to obtain enough extract from the plant material itself for use as an ingredient. So the only way that you can get enough of these cannabinoids is to take the extract from the plant and chemically synthesize it to produce these isomers, typically by converting CBD into Delta-8 or Delta-10. And synthetic products that have been chemically synthesized do not meet the definition of an extract under the regulation. Furthermore, under Article 5 in the Virginia Food and Drink Law, it is a violation to manufacture or sell any food product containing a cannabinoid that is not an industrial hemp extract. And I wanted to remind you that we are specifically talking about the extracts derived from the hemp plant material. So that's what's approved to be used as a food ingredient in Virginia. The plant material itself, such as the leaves and the flower, cannot be offered for sale as a food, nor can they be used as a food ingredient. So we don't allow things like hemp tea. We don't allow hemp pesto that has been made with the leaves, anything like that. And it's the cannabinoids that are being extracted from the cannabis sativa plant, really, that we're speaking about. And so the cannabinoids are the naturally occurring, biologically active chemical constituents of cannabis sativa. So I've included a couple examples here. We've got cannabidiol, cannabigerol, cannabinol, and Delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol. CBD, CBG, and CBN are very common cannabinoids that are seen in hemp extract products, with CBD and THC being the most commonly talked about cannabinoids. Delta-9 THC is the most common naturally occurring isomer of THC. And often, if somebody just says THC, they're referring to Delta-9. And it is allowable up to 0.3% by weight. So THC will actually gradually break down over time into CBN. So typically older hemp flower that has been exposed to oxygen or heat or light over time will tend to have more CBN. And as I had mentioned before, this degradation of Delta-9 is also how Delta-8 and Delta-10 may sometimes be detected in very small amounts, but CBN is the primary product of that degradation process. So the regulation outlines standards and batch testing requirements for manufacturers of an extract. So they have to test the extract for microbiological content, mycotoxin content, heavy metal content, residual solvent content, pesticide chemical residues, and total delta-9 THC. And additionally, they also have to test the extract for cannabinoid content if the extract is labeled as having any amount of a cannabinoid. These testing requirements are specifically for the manufacturer of the extract, and processors who are using an industrial hemp extract as an ingredient in food are not subject to these testing requirements. However, you do need to ensure that the extract was purchased from an approved source, meaning somebody who's under inspection with their regulatory authority and in compliance with them. Extract manufacturers must maintain these testing records for at least 3 years. And this chart just shows some examples of common cannabinoids that are allowable in food products because they are not chemically synthesized or artificially created. You'll see in the note section of CBD, for example, it says that it was approved by the FDA for use in the drug Epidiolex. This is a prescription that is used to treat seizures. And to date, this is the only cannabis drug that is approved by the FDA, or cannabis-derived drug approved by the FDA. However, as I said before, CBD is still considered an adulterant by FDA in food. The hemp regulation also outlines specific labeling requirements for consumable food, beverage, and dietary supplement hemp products that are intended for human consumption. This is going to overlap a little bit with some of the other presentations today, but in general, the regulation does say that all products must meet the labeling requirements set forth in the food labeling regulation, which is 21 CFR Part 101. And just to reiterate what some folks have already gone over today, that includes the name of the product, the net content declaration, the ingredients list, the name and address of the manufacturer or distributor, and a nutrition facts or supplement facts panel. There are some small business exemptions for the nutrition facts and supplement facts panel on a label. Additionally, all hemp products must be labeled with a batch code. And if a cannabinoid declaration is made, then they must include the number of milligrams of such cannabinoids. So for example, if they say that the product contains CBD, they specifically have to list the milligrams of CBD contained in the product. Lastly, the labels cannot include drug claims. In addition to these general requirements, there are also additional requirements for products that contain THC in any amount. So products that contain THC in any amount must also include a statement that the product may not be sold to a person younger than 21 years of age. It must state the amount that constitutes a single serving, the number of milligrams of THC contained in each serving, and the total percent and total milligrams of THC in the product. So I know that's kind of a lot to take in, and obviously you'll have the presentation for reference, but I did just include an example label here just to kind of go through those components from the regulation. So just looking at the label, as far as general labeling requirements, we do have a name of the product, full spectrum hemp extract. We have a net content declaration at the bottom, 1 fluid ounce, 30 milliliters. We have a complete ingredients list, and we have a name and address of manufacturer. Additionally, this label shows the hemp product labeling requirements. So all hemp products must be labeled with a batch code. So we've got that here on this label. Additionally, if a cannabinoid declaration is made on the label, they must list the specific milligrams of the cannabinoid. So they've got that here with 500 milligrams CBD. And because this product also contains THC, it's subject to some additional labeling requirements. So they must have an age restriction statement on the label stating that the product may not be sold to persons younger than 21 years of age. And additionally, they must have the amount that makes up a single serving, the milligrams of THC per serving, the total milligrams of THC, and the total percent of THC. So as you see here, they've got serving size 1 milliliter, 2 milligrams of THC per serving, 60 milligrams total THC, and 0.2% total THC. And finally, I wanted to touch on some additional hemp oversight that happens within the state, but outside of the VDACS food safety program. So the 2022 to 24 biennium budget passed by the 2022 General Assembly and signed by Governor Youngkin amended the Virginia Consumer Protection Act. The Office of the Attorney General is the agency authorized to address violations of the VCPA. And through the budget, new provisions for both inhaled and consumable products that contain THC were added that are intended to inform adult consumers about THC-containing products and to prevent children from consuming potentially intoxicating products. So the provisions state that there is, for these products that contain THC, there's no sale of products to persons younger than 21, that the products must be labeled as required by the VCPA, that the products must be in child-proof packaging, that they may not be packaged in a package that mimics a trademark brand or other famous identifying mark, and that the products may not depict or be in the shape of a human, animal, vehicle, or fruit. So I have included an example here of some Delta-8 hemp products that were found in a convenience store during an inspection. And I just kind of included them here as an example. As you can see, they mimic the Sour Patch and Starburst branding, and they could easily be mistaken for those candies by a child or even other consumers. So, and that concludes my presentation. So like the others, I feel like I kind of ripped through it quickly, but I can try to pull up the Q&A and see what questions we have.
We have one. Thank you, Megan. Tynella Hall asks, I currently have a hot sauce that uses cold pressed hemp oil and have experienced a lot of pushback. Is there something that I can do about this?
Yeah, so if it's it depends if it's hemp seed oil or actual hemp oil. So she just said cold pressed hemp oil, so I guess I'll answer it that way. You do want to make sure that the cold pressed hemp oil is purchased from an approved source that's under inspection. And then you just need to make sure that your hemp product, which is your hot sauce that contains the cold pressed hemp oil, is labeled as outlined in the hemp regulation.
Okay, thank you. And we'll share all the links that Megan's shared and her presentation, and of course, a recording. We'll continue to work with VDACS to answer all your questions as they come in. Next up, we have Erin Williams. Erin is the Industrial Hemp Program Manager at VDACS, and she will update us on hemp legislation.
Good afternoon. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate the invitation to join your meeting this afternoon and talk about hemp products. As Kim said, I'm the Industrial Hemp Program Manager at VDACS. I manage the program that issues industrial hemp registration so that people can possess industrial hemp. We issue grower registrations, processor registrations, and then we issue a registration for someone who might be temporarily possessing plant material that they didn't grow or that they're not going to process. So maybe somebody who's going to store it or dry it for a grower. That's called our dealer registration. But today, and also within VDACS, I serve on the agency's legislative team. So I'm going to give you an update on the hemp product legislation that's pending as a result of the 2023 General Assembly session. But before we get into that legislation, I'll go over the current rules for some specific hemp products that I know we often get a lot of questions about. So we'll talk about hemp products intended for smoking, topical hemp products, hemp plants, and then hemp in animal products. To get started, we'll talk about those hemp products intended for smoking. There are a couple of different sections in the Code of Virginia that address something that someone might smoke or inhale. So the term that we see in the code is as broad as you see on the screen: hemp products intended for smoking. So the definition doesn't give us specific examples, but I think we can safely assume that vapes, smokable flower, and pre-rolls all kind of fall under something that's intended for smoking. The criminal code in that section that you see on the slide contains some distribution and packaging requirements for hemp products intended for smoking. Specifically, those products can't be sold to someone under 21 years of age. Those products have to be sold in sealed packages, and there has to be some specific signage regarding the restriction of those sales to people under 21. That section of the code is one that law enforcement has authority to enforce, as well as ABC agents. There is also, as Megan just touched on, there are also some provisions in the Virginia Consumer Protection Act that pertain to smokable products. The term used in the Consumer Protection Act is a substance that contains THC that's intended for consumption by inhalation. And as Megan pointed out, these provisions pertain to both inhaled products as well as products that someone might consume orally. But again, today I'm going to focus on the inhaled products. In the Consumer Protection Act, there are some additional distribution, packaging, and labeling requirements for inhaled products that contain THC. The Office of the Attorney General has the authority to pursue violations of the Consumer Protection Act. That law also gives consumers the ability to pursue businesses who may have violated the act with respect to the transaction between that consumer and that business. So let's look at the details of what's required within the Consumer Protection Act for smokable hemp. It has to be in child-resistant packaging. It has to have a label that states some specific items. Those are the items that Megan went over earlier with respect to labeling that reflects the age restriction, the ingredients of the substance, and the THC quantity of the substance. Those substances that contain THC that are intended to be inhaled also, when they're sold, have to be accompanied by a certificate of analysis. That certificate of analysis has to be produced by a lab that is ISO certified ISO accredited. And that certificate of analysis has to state the THC concentration of the substance or the batch from which the substance originated. The substance that contains THC cannot be in packaging that has a trademark or a famous mark that you are not authorized to use. And that goes back to the pictures in Megan's presentation. That kind of packaging is prohibited unless you're approved to use those marks. So moving on to some other hemp products that we get questions about. Topical hemp products are regulated by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. That they would fall under the cosmetic regulations. and you can access that information on FDA's website. We get questions about whether hemp plants can be sold and who can buy or sell a hemp plant. So this would be a plant in a pot that still has its roots. To buy or sell a hemp plant, you must have an industrial hemp grower registration from VDACS. Because again, the law is situated such that any industrial hemp plant material needs to be in the possession of somebody with an industrial hemp registration. So if someone is selling kind of starter plants that they're growing those plants, they need to have a grower registration. If someone is buying those starter plants or a plant, then the buyer also needs to have the registration. Similarly with hemp planting seed, if that seed is still viable and is going to germinate or sprout into a plant, to sell that seed, you need to have an industrial hemp grower registration. To buy that seed, you need to have an industrial hemp grower registration. If you are selling seed in Virginia, you need to have a seed dealer license, and that's a license issued by VDACS as well. And that applies to any seller of an agricultural seed in the state. Some other products that we get questions about are products intended for animals. There are both federal and state rules at play when we talk about products that are given to animals. For animal feed, and when we use the term animal feed, we're talking about a single commodity or a complete feed, or even the ingredients in the feed, animal treats, pet treats, nutritional supplements. Those products may not contain hemp-derived ingredients, including CBD. So, and that's a function of where federal law currently is. And Virginia's law reflects that federal law. So no hemp-derived ingredients are approved for use in a commercial animal feed. There is also a distinct law for animal remedies in Virginia. So animal remedies are something that is intended to affect an animal other than nutritionally. And so they're often administered in terms of a dose that would be given to the animal or the pet. Any product that contains a part or includes a part of a cannabis plant is explicitly exempt from the requirements of Virginia's animal remedies law, which requires a registration by VDACS. So an animal remedy that includes a cannabis-derived ingredient is, again, exempt from the animal remedies law. If anyone has questions specific to hemp or cannabis-derived ingredients in animal feed or animal remedies, VDACS's Office of Plant Industry Services, specifically their Ag Commodities program, is the best place to go for the quickest answer on those. But now I'll move on to the hemp product legislation that the General Assembly considered during this past General Assembly session. Just to give you a little bit of background so that you understand the status of the legislation. The legislation has passed both the House of Delegates and the Senate, and it's currently under review by the governor. He's been hearing feedback from hemp industry stakeholders, from cannabis industry stakeholders more broadly. And again, like all legislation that has been passed by the House and the Senate, the governor has a deadline of March 27th to act on the legislation. So right now the status is pending. I can tell you what's in the legislation, the provisions that are in the legislation, but until it's final, it's not final. So as the legislation sits today, it establishes some new THC caps for both hemp products and industrial hemp extracts intended for human consumption. The legislation proposes to cap those hemp products and hemp extracts at 0.3% total THC, and cap those products and extracts at no more than 2 milligrams of total THC per package of product. And for both of those calculations, all of the THCs would be included in the calculation. So the Delta 9, Delta 8, Delta 10, any natural or synthetic THC in that product gets calculated as part of the determining whether the product meets or exceeds the proposed cap. The legislation also establishes some new food and drink law labeling and packaging requirements for extracts or food containing hemp extract. Some of the provisions mirror those provisions that exist today in the Consumer Protection Act. So what will be new in the food and drink law is that child-resistant packaging requirement that if you're complying with the Consumer Protection Act right now, you'll be in compliance with. There is also added to the food and drink law the requirement that when the extract or food containing an extract is offered for sale, it has to be accompanied by that certificate of analysis that's produced by an independent lab that's ISO accredited. New under the legislation requires that those testing labs will also have to have a DEA, U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration registration. And the retailer of those products will need to have a copy on hand of the testing lab's certificate of accreditation to the ISO standard. So that's the certificate that a third party produces after they confirm that the lab has met the ISO standard that's required. The pending legislation also establishes some new penalties for certain violations of the food and drink law. Is proposed a up to $10,000 a day civil penalty for each day a violation occurs. A violation would include manufacturing or selling an extract or food with an extract without the required food permit. That food permit is currently required. The new piece to it is the civil penalty that would be attached for that activity. There are also some proposed Class 1 misdemeanors for certain violations of the food and drink law. The pending hemp product legislation also makes some amendments to the Consumer Protection Act. It adds some new prohibited acts within the Consumer Protection Act. Specifically, the legislation will prohibit the sale or offering for sale of any substance that's intended for human consumption orally or by inhalation that contains a synthetic derivative of THC. So that there would be an outright prohibition against that sale of something something that has a synthetic derivative of THC that someone would swallow or inhale. The legislation also amends the Consumer Protection Act to require that the testing labs have a DEA registration that's reflected over in the food and drink law we just spoke about. So any labs testing a hemp product that has THC that's consumed orally or by inhalation needs to be tested by a lab with a DEA registration. The legislation also amends the Consumer Protection Act to prohibit the sale of a topical hemp product if that product doesn't have a bittering agent, if it isn't labeled stating that it's not intended for human consumption, or if that product has a THC concentration over 0.3% total THC. There's some exemptions in that piece pertaining to topical hemp products, in that if the product complies with the bittering agent and it has the label and it doesn't exceed 0.3% total THC, then it's exempt from that 2 milligram per package cap on the THC that we find in other parts of the code. The Consumer Protection Act is also proposed to be amended to allow for the sale of any topical hemp product that was produced before July 1 of this year, as long as the the seller can document the date of the manufacturer. Once VDACS knows what the final requirements will be with respect to hemp products after July 1, we will definitely communicate that to our stakeholders, both our food stakeholders and our hemp stakeholders. Again, once that communication will come out sometime between April and July 1. Whenever any legislation is enacted, with some few exceptions, the provisions become effective July 1 of the year in which they're enacted. So we expect whatever the hemp product legislation looks like, its provisions will become effective July 1, 2023, and we most certainly will communicate those requirements to everyone who interacts with the food safety program and interacts with the hemp program once VDACS is aware of what those requirements will be. My contact information is on the screen. Please don't hesitate to reach out with any questions you may have. I'm going to take a peek at the questions and see if I can get anybody answers today.
We have one that, how does one get industrial hemp grower registration?
So you can, our industrial hemp grower registration application is available online. I'll drop a link to it in the chat shortly. But you complete the application. You do have to mail it in along with an FBI identity history report and your application fee. And we accept applications on a rolling basis throughout the year, so there's no deadline by which anyone needs to apply to get that grower registration. But the registration is, the application's available online.
Great. And can hemp seed that results in high THC phenotypes be sold with a seed license and a hemp registration?
So in Virginia, hemp's concentration cap is the same as that with federal law. Industrial hemp can have no more than 0.3% Delta 9 total THC. So whatever plant grows out of the seed, that plant cannot exceed 0.3% Delta 9 THC. If that's the case, that seed may be sold in Virginia. You'd need a seed dealer's license. And if you're growing those plants in Virginia to produce that seed, you need to have an industrial hemp grower registration from VDACS.
Okay, and I know this one's been answered, but we'll get it again. So no dog treats containing CBD are allowed, correct?
Correct.
And is there a new fee involved?
A new fee for the industrial hemp registration fees have not changed. A grower registration is $150, processor is $200, and a industrial hemp dealer registration is $250. Those have stayed the same, and we don't expect to change.
And are any smokables allowed at markets?
They would have to be sold in compliance with the laws that I just went over.
Okay. Would soap that contains hemp seed oil fall under topical products?
So a topical product is something that's applied to the skin. I believe I would refer that individual to FDA's website to check out the definition of cosmetic. It certainly wouldn't fall into under the food and drink law or be something that someone inhales. So I think you're headed towards a cosmetic, and again, that's FDA. Any special equipment to measure the level of THC. With respect to a crop, so the grower is not required to have equipment to measure the THC. But the grower is required to submit compliance samples to approved test labs to measure the THC. So the lab would take care of measuring that. And then I think that's similar with respect to someone making an extract that would contain THC. There wouldn't be a requirement that the testing be done on site, but certainly need to engage with the lab so that you're monitoring your extract for compliance with the THC concentration. I see another question. Can you reuse hemp at your market? I'm not sure what that
refuse.
Means. Reuse?
Refuse.
Oh, refuse. Oh, just refuse. I would say that would be within the market manager's purview to, just as you decide what other vendors you might have participate, that would be a decision you could make.
Yes. Did you answer the soap question? I might have dropped you.
I think that I would say topicals, and I'd refer to FDA.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's it.
Any last questions for Erin and Megan on hemp CBD at the markets? You guys, thank you so much. I can't thank you enough. As you well know from all of our communications throughout the year, we get this quite a bit. So I really appreciate you being here today and answering the questions and providing all the resources. Last question down there, Delta 8 and Delta 10? Question mark. I guess that means, that's still a no-no, right?
This would be if it is synthetically produced, you're going to have a hard time meeting that definition of industrial hemp extract. The ingredients in a food need to come from the plant material, and we need to have documentation that that is the case.
And if it goes into a food product that has to be inspected, right? They're not going to be able to meet the inspection qualifications. Okay. All right. And I think those are all of the questions. Thank you guys so much for providing us with this information. We really appreciate it. And look forward to talking to you after the legislation signed into place or not as to what's new. So thank you very much. So I would like to say a special thanks to all of our partners. Again, the Virginia Department of Health, Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, Virginia Cooperative Extension, and the Virginia Family Nutrition Program, as well as the USDA, FMPP, Farm Credit, VSU College of Agriculture, Prince Charitable Trust, Virginia Fresh Match, and the Virginia's for Farmers Market Lovers Trail and Virginia's for Farmers Market Lovers. We thank you.